Any good to go over example after example if there's questions. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start today by seeing if you have any questions either about the homework assignments, about the setup of Android, if you're running into difficulties at all with any of those things, or over any of the examples I've gone over in the past few weeks. Thursday, bring your machine that has Android loaded on it, assuming that you have one. And if you don't, make sure you get that installed and installed properly. Because Thursday I want to be a work day where I want to really work on these things and make some progress. All right. So I do have an example to go over today if we don't have anything else to talk about. But we had actually, there's been a total of 3 assignments, and we've had someone, a few people get in the second assignment, but the second assignment is a rock, paper, scissors. The third one is a currency, and the fourth one is an enhancement to the rock, paper, scissors. So we all should be working on Lab 4 at this point, and we still need to get Lab 2 in, many of us. So let's start out with, are there any questions? Are there any difficulty? Do you perceive the holdup is with the whole... What do you perceive the holdup is? Are you having trouble getting things started? Are you having trouble with the programming logic? Is there anything in particular that you're running into that's causing you problems?
I had a couple of weeks.
Okay. All right. Okay. Do you?
Finally did get it set up, and now it's just.
Okay.
I think
Okay. Well, that's part of the day Thursday. Part of the reason for the day Thursday is that we can have an opportunity to really focus some time, and you can get some of your questions answered as far as that goes. Other questions or comments? Okay. Yeah, and I unfortunately I don't know if I have an answer for that completely, other than just getting in and practicing and trying to create an application from start and trying to duplicate the steps that I went over when I created an application from start and that sort of thing. Yes?
Is there a difference between ending a text view or things in the layout with the / and then the greater than sign versus ending it with a,
What looks like a tag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. Question is in the XML layout, sometimes you'll see 2 different syntaxes for, and this is true for HTML too, and it's definitely true in our XML. Sometimes you'll see things that look like this. And I won't put the whole tag in. And then other times you'll see something that looks like this. That's your question, right? Yeah. What's the difference between those 2 things? Well, let's look at the bottom one first, because the bottom one is probably the little bit more standard. That's where we have a start and ending tag. And that is the ending tag. All right. So the start tag is the name of the tag. It might have some attributes included in it. And then we have the greater than sign. Then we have everything that comprises that tag in the middle. When we're all done with everything about the text view, we have the ending text view tag. All right, so pretty common, even in HTML, you'll see syntax that looks like this. What is this then? This is what's called an empty tag. In other words, this is a starting and ending tag rolled into one. So it's simply an alternative syntax when there really isn't anything between the starting and ending tag. In other words, let's say we had a text view, and immediately following the text view was the end text view tag. In other words, there was nothing between the start and end text view tag. That's a little awkward, not easily readable. We can replace this with this. So this becomes a starting and ending tag rolled into one. So in XML terms, that's an empty tag. Let me see if I can find an example of that. Okay, here's an example of it. A little bit different because one's an edit text and one is a text view. But notice that we have our text view tag and then we have the slash greater than sign. That indicates that itself is a start and ending tag all rolled into one. All right. Now, in the case of this edit text tag, the edit text tag itself contains another tag. So we can't use that syntax. We need to have the ending tag separate from the beginning tag and have everything that belongs to that tag in between the start and ending tag. So alternatively, instead of doing this, we could have, whoops, we can't do anything if we don't hit the right keys. We could do this. We could do that, right? Or of our start tag and immediately following at the ending tag. But that's a little goofy, so we can use an empty tag like that. Yes? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Probably.
If you want to comment out a line, hash marks in front of it.
No. Commenting out in XML is, I'm going to have to think about this for a second. I don't know. How do I comment out a block of tags in XML? Yeah, let's see. Yeah, same thing as in HTML, which is you can do this. Greater than sign, exclamation point, dash, dash, and then dash, dash, greater than sign for the ending comment. Well, the one possibility is make sure that you are deleting it from the right place. Well, that wouldn't really deal with a class, but let's see. if you remember in lecture when I was trying to create an empty application, I was editing the Android manifest from the bin. And that was causing me grief. And that even though I was making a change to it, because that's the binary, that's the compiled version. So the one I would want to change would be that. Your particular case, I don't know. That doesn't ring true. It doesn't match anything that I've ever experienced with this. I mean, everything I've experienced when you delete a line is gone. So maybe that's something that we could try to recreate in lab.
XML or Java comments is greater than some or less than after.
No, that's XML comments. You would ask about XML comments. No. XML comments are exclamation point dash dash, your block of comments, then dash dash greater than sign. Java is slash slash, or to do a block of code slash asterisk, asterisk slash. Other questions? Yes.
I made the other for the rock paper scissors.
Mm-hmm.
I made the spinner. I made the first text view, to say rock paper scissors.
Mm-hmm.
Then I made the spinner in the next text view. However, only when I run the application, the first text view.
I'm not understanding the question. If you could repeat that.
Okay. In the activity main, I have three things: a text view, a spinner, and
Okay, gotcha.
however, only the first text view is
Okay.
check the strings file and everything else, and I made sure that everything is correct. However, it's not showing up.
It's not showing up when you run the application? What are you putting in there?
A spinner and another text view. The object does not show up on the screen, just the first text view that I have.
Well, what is in your main? Well, we can talk about this because I'm a little confused with what you're saying about you're saying that you have a second something that has the spinner control. What contains the spinner control and the second text view? Yeah. Is that all in your main XML file?
It's in the activity main XML file.
Okay. So activity main XML file. So you have a text view. Immediately following that, you have a spinner.
Yes.
And then you have another text view.
Yes.
And it's not showing.
Yeah, the spinner and the text view, the second one aren't showing.
When you say the second one, the spinner and the text?
Text view, spinner, text view.
Right.
Spinner and text view aren't showing up.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. Unfortunately, I wanted to see. I wasn't understanding the question. That's something probably best to take a look at.
Okay.
And again, we might adjourn a little bit early today to take a look at it. But definitely stick around to take a look at it and see there. Other questions as far as this goes, as far as the assignments or the examples or anything like that? Yes? Okay.
Supposed to save that in an external database. It says they keep a record all through one of what each person selected.
No, you don't need to put that in a database. We're going to look over today. This is why this is the example I have planned for today, to see how you can store some stuff. All right. Doesn't have to be in a database. Yeah, you have a number of options for persistence in Android. One of them is storing it in a database. All right. But there's sort of a low-powered version that doesn't involve a database, where if you're just storing some simple data, then you can store it in another structure. And that's what we'll see today. Other questions? All right. I want to go over this Twitter example because this Twitter example has two things that are key for Lab 4. For those of you that walked in a little bit late, a couple of things. First of all, there's no new assignment this week. We want to make sure that we have an opportunity to catch up. All right? So there's no new assignment this week. Thursday is a work day. So if you would bring, I assume you all have a laptop that has Android installed. And if you can bring that to class on Thursday, I will have devices if you want to test using that. And we'll spend the time ironing out some of the questions. Again, we'll also, depending on how the lecture goes today, may spend some time today ironing out some of these questions. Whenever we're done with this example, we'll break and go to lab and do that. For Lab 4, though, there's really two things that are a little bit different than before. Number one is we want to have something scrolling. So for the rock, paper, scissors, as you play rock, paper, scissors games, it'll tell you who wins. You want that to fill up the screen and then just start to scroll. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Or we'll see that in the Twitter example. The other thing is some persistence to the data. In other words, we want to remember the history of who has won in rock, paper, scissors. So even if we shut the application down and start it back up, we want to remember who has done that. So we'll take a look at how you can do that. So let me, are there other questions before we get into the Twitter example? All right, let's go and look at this. Let's run the Twitter. Favorite Twitter search? Good. Run as an Android application. We'll pick our Samsung device. It's already installed and it's griping about that. So let me go in real quick and delete this. Uninstall it so I can reinstall it. I'm not really sure why it shows me an error in that case, but who am I to argue? All right, so let's try again. Take two. All right, here we have, put this here, I hope it shows up reasonably well. We can get a sense of it even if we can't see everything in it. There is a edit text field at the top of the page that says enter Twitter search query here. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a little I wanted to say the word database, but that's not a correct word. We want to build a set of Twitter queries. The assumption is that we're going to want to come back and run these from time to time. So, you know, maybe I put in the dozen or so topics that I'm most interested in, and I can go and I can save those queries, and then I can go in and at a later time go and run the query again without having to search it. So it will remember what I've searched for. So let's say I am interested in Android development. So I type in the word Android development as my favorite search. It's one of my favorite searches. I can tag my query. That is, I can give it like a little label so that I can come back and see it. Maybe I'll call this ANDDEV. Not Andrew. All right. Then I can save it. All right. What happened is, after I saved it, it comes up with a new row in here. That row consists of a button with my label on it, with the tag that I put for it, a button to edit, and then a button to, or a checkbox rather, that I can check and I can delete it. All right. Let's say I'm interested in also mobile web development. So I can type in mobile web. I can give it a tag of MOB web. And it, of course, thinks I want cobwebs. And I can save it. I'll put another one in here. I can put an HTML5. And I'll put in, for the label for that, HTML5. All right. So I can add as many queries as I want. If I add more than a certain number, it will scroll. So I can scroll through it. We won't do that right now. I can select the ones that I want to clear and click this button and get rid of them. Actually, it will get rid of all of them. I forgot. I tweaked Deedle's application a little bit to get rid of all of them. So if I go and click clear them, it gets rid of all of them. All right. That will be an enhancement that we'll look at doing at some point, is putting it in so that we can clear selectively which ones we want. All right. So let me go and re-enter this. All right. If I click Edit, it comes back up and I can edit it. So if I spelled the word development wrong or whatever, I can go and change it. If I click the button, it runs out to the web and does a search. We will. Yeah, Twitter burned us with an API update. Close your eyes and imagine a list of search results that show about Android development. This actually is nothing more than Twitter's page. We could take a minute to correct this and do that, but I don't want to interrupt our discussion of Android. So this is out of the hands of our application. This is simply opening up a web browser. If you notice, if you look closely, this is my web browser. This is not my Android application. So the application is simply using an old API, which is no longer supported, and that's where I'm getting the error. So we'll focus on this part of the application, the part of application where we enter stuff in and we can save it and so on. Now what's different about this? And then let's go and we can close out of this application if we want. We can even kill the application if we want. Notice if we go back in, we're left showing what was there before. All right, even if we kill the application. All right. So, the two things that are different in this application from what we've seen before are, well, let's list the things that are different. There's probably more than two. Number one, first thing that's different is our user interface is dynamic. All right. If you remember all the examples we had so far, we had an edit text field, we had a button, we had a result field. And if you put something in the button, you could do a calculate and you could set a label. But if you had a edit text field, a button, and a label, that's all we had, those three things. All right. Now we have actually buttons that appear dynamically. So in other words, initially there were 0 buttons here. I go in and add a third search. And click Save. My user interface now has 3 things in it. So our UI is expanding as we go in and save queries. So that's one thing that is different about this. We're having an expanding UI. How does that relate to your assignments? Well, in Lab 4, you need to make a scrolling thing for rock, paper, and scissors. So there'll be a similar thing. When there's no games played, there may be no label showing up. After you've played one game, there'll be one label saying who won that game. After the second game, there'll be 2 labels, and so on down the line. All right? Other thing is, this remembers what this is. So if I close the application, get out of it, go back into it, my searches are still there. So that's kind of persistence that we may have seen that to a smaller degree, but this is sort of a greater level than that. The third difference is that this thing is going to scroll when we add more things in. And I'm not going to do it now in the interest of time, but you can trust me on that. It'll scroll. The last thing that is different is that this actually invokes another application. All right? In other words, when I click this search, this actually fires off another application, in this case the web browser. Now that's not something that we do in this example, in any of your example assignments yet, but it'll be good to know, and we will use something like that, I'm pretty sure, on future assignments. So that's sort of inventory of what's different. I think it's a good approach. The way I try to teach this and the way I tried to learn it when I was going through these examples and learning these examples is to first sort of take inventory of the stuff that we already know, that we already covered. All right? Edit text field, yeah, we got that down. Button, yeah, we got that down. But to look and say, what's the new part of this application? It sort of pays to take inventory and say, what's the new stuff in this application, and sort of focus on that. So we'll do that as we explore this application. So let's go and look at, repeat please. Where do you see that? That's a good question. I know the acronym. I don't know off the top of my head what it stands for. Yeah. Representational state transfer? It's a way of persisting data through an HTTP request, I suppose. All right. Let's look at this. Now, if we look at the Twitter search, we look in our resources, we're going to notice something. We have two, count them, two XML files. All right. What are these XML files? All right. Well, we can probably figure one of them out, right? The main file is our main file, right? It's the main XML. In other words, it represents the page that gets loaded when we run it. So this is the main XML file is contained in that. What is this other XML file? This other XML file is going to represent the new row that we're going to stick into this area here. All right? So you notice as we add in new Twitter queries here and click Save, we actually add to the GUI, right? We add to the user interface. We add to the interface each time a button, another button, and a checkbox. Again, the original, if I recall correctly, did not have the checkbox in there. Yeah, that was something that I in a previous semester altered it, and I think I grabbed the altered files instead of the original. All right. So we have a button, another button, and a checkbox that gets added every time we save a new one of these. This XML file contains that. All right. So, what is that? What are those things? It's going to be a table row. Because, if we look at this, we actually have this scroll view that contains a table layout actually is what contains this. So, in our main XML, we have a scroll view here. Gotta be careful where I touch there. We have a scroll view there, and it contains a table. And what is in the new tag XML represents a new row that we're going to add to that table. So every time there's a new tag that we save, that we want to do a search for, boom, one of these gets created and gets put into that table. So let's look at the main XML. This main XML, we actually have nested tables. All right? The whole layout is a table layout, and the contents of this area is another table. So we actually have two tables here. A big table and a little table, if you will. The big table is everything. The little table is this section here. All right? So we have a table layout. Here's our ID and all that. We have our first row, which contains an edit text for us to put in the query that we want to do. Table layout. First row contains the edit text field. Second row contains the edit text field and button. All right. So first row contains a big edit text field. Second row contains an edit text field and a button. The third text row then consists of this label that says tag searches. All right. So the third row consists of that. This is the fun row. row number 3. All right? Because this row represents this in the big table. It's a scroll view that is going to be as big as it needs to be, and it contains another table layout. So if we're going to draw this to see what we got here, we have our main XML consists of a table. Table's first row consists of an edit text. So row 0 of the big table consists of an edit text. Row 1 consists of an edit text and a button. Row 2 consists of the label tag searches. Row 3 consists of a scroll view. So this is an edit text. This is another edit text. This is a button. This is a label. This is a scroll view, which, as you can imagine, allows us to scroll as the content gets too big for it. And inside the scroll view is another table. And initially, that table doesn't have any rows. Right? Because initially, when we fire this app for the first time, there's no searches. We haven't saved any searches, so there's no rows in that table. So it's just a table that doesn't contain anything. Finally, our last row of the big table is the clear button. Clear selected tags. So, that's row 4, right. So, row 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, edit text and button, label, scroll view, button. Inside that scroll view is a big old table that initially doesn't start out with anything in it. So this is a main XML. We then have another XML that's called the new tag XML. And what it contains is, it contains a template for the new rows that we're going to pop into this table. So it contains the template for the new rows that we're going to pop into this table. So if we look at that XML file, we have a let's see, wrong one. We have a table row that contains a button, another button, and then finally the checkbox. So this contains a template for each new row. Each new row we get is going to get added to this table. All right? So that's the one thing that's a little different than this. This, having two XML files, allows us to have sort of that dynamic GUI, right? We don't have simply a set of buttons that we're going to fill in. We have as many buttons as someone enters searches for. And every time someone enters a search, a new button gets created, or a new row of buttons gets created and gets put in there. All right? So the two XML files is important for that. Now, getting back to the rock, paper, scissors program where you're going to scroll the list of winners, you're not going to have a row that consists of buttons, but you'll probably do a very similar thing. You'll have a table row that consists of a label that indicates who the winner and loser was and what they threw. All right. Values. Our strings, just like before. All right, we won't really look at those. We have two other files, though. We have dimensions and we have colors. Now, those are used here in our main XML. Or are they used in the new tag XML? Yeah, they're used in the new tag XML. So instead of me having in a number, like we had before, if you remember in previous examples, we'd do something like, would say the width is 120 dp or something like that. All right. Here, we point to a dimension file, a dimension XML file to say what the width is. This, again, the whole is continuing that theme and that notion of separating stuff into components so we can change one without changing the other. If we have a tiny screen, we can make a tiny button simply by having a second set of resource files for tiny screens. All right? So we've abstracted all that into its own file, and we can swap that out as we need. The light orange, I believe, is in the main XML file. The background, we specify @color light orange, which is this particular shade of orange. So we have more values files. So we have values not just for our strings, but for our dimensions and even for colors. We'll see a few more examples of these. And again, this just gives us one extra layer of separating stuff out so that we can do one thing and make a change in one place without worrying about it messing up somewhere else. The icons here, we have our icon, nothing dramatic here. Android, we don't have anything too dramatic in this file. Same as before. All right, let's look at the actual Java source. All right. Now, it's going to have a lot of stuff in common with all the stuff that we've seen before. All right. We have some instance variables at the top of this class. We'll look at these three initially. All right. What those are pointers to the different things in our UI. The table layout is going to point to what? It's going to point to this table layout, the list of queries that the person has entered and saved. All right. The edit text field for the query edit is going to correspond to that text box where we edit that, and the edit for the tag is going to correspond to the tag. So standard sort of things, right? We're doing just as we've done before. We've said, we have instructions in here to say, query table layout, find view by ID, r.id, query table layout, and that will point us to this guy right here. The query table layout that is in that scroll view. So, we have those things there. The save search is what gives us the persistence. And we're going to put this on hold for now. We'll come back to the save searches. But shared preferences is a class that we can use to save things that the user enters in, whether they be preferences or data or whatever. All right. We then set our listeners, or we then point to and set our listeners to our buttons. All right. So we have 2 buttons on here, at least 2 buttons as of now, right? There's 2 buttons sort of on the main XML. There's a save button and there's a clear tags button. So we're creating listeners for each of those. We create a listener for the save button, which is called, cleverly enough, save button listener, and then one for the clear that's called clear tags button listener. We then call this refresh buttons with a null, and that again is relating to the persistence of the data. So we're gonna set that off to the side. So let's run through when someone enters one in. So I have my view. I enter in a query. All right, and click Save. All right, let's trace through what happens that. Well, what happens? Well, our Save button listeners on click event fires off, right? We've identified that that button, our Save button, the object responsible for handling what happens when that button gets clicked is our object called Save button listener. So I'll go down here to our Save button listener. All right. Does some validation to make sure that they've entered something in. If I don't enter something in, I get a little alert saying, please enter something in. And that happens down here. A little alert pops up. Whoops. A little alert pops up if I didn't enter something in. If I have entered something in, I call a method that says make tag. What does that make tag button do, or function do? What it does is it takes the argument and it looks to see if that query already exists in our shared preferences. All right? What does that mean? What are our shared preferences? Our shared preferences are an ordered pair of data. All right? When I talk about an ordered pair, I mean there is a name for the field and a value for the field. So, in another application, it might be something like this. I might have a field that is named name, and the value will be Mike. I might have a field called email, whose value is mzellers at LorraineCCC. So, the shared preferences is a structure, sometimes it's called a hash file, where you have a key that points to a piece of data. All right? So, our hash file in this instance is the tag that we've given that points to the value of the query. So if I type in ANDDEV for the tag, that gets stored as the tag or the key. The query is then the full word. So, I call this method, make tag. I pass it the query from the text box and the tag from the text box. That's what I'm doing here. I'm calling make tag and I'm passing it the text box and the tags, the text box for the query and the text box for the tag. I look to see if that tag already exists in in the query, or the save preferences. String original query equals. I then put into the save preferences the ordered pair, that is, the tag and the query, and then finally I apply, so I save it. So now, after I've saved something in, it gets put into that hash table, that ordered pairs called shared preferences, that consists of a key and a value, where the key is a tag and the value is the value of the query. This is a different usage of the word hash. A hash table is where you have, again, a name of a. It's like an array, except the subscripts aren't numbers. The subscripts are strings. So in other words, instead of asking for element 0, you ask for an element that has the name of email address or the name of and dev or something like that. And that's a hash table. So it's like an array. Again, it's a structure where you have a key and a value. Almost like the Windows registry. Right, the Windows registry, if you look at it on the lowest level, you have a key, and that key points to a value. That's similar to what we have here. But we're not done there yet. We still have to go and put the button on the screen, because all we've done is save the tag. All right. We have to also refresh the buttons. All right. Well, it will be, like for example in this case, will be, again, not really a tag, but again, in this case, the tag is whatever I've named the tag for my query. Right? If we look on the screen, oops. This is called tag, this is called query. So the tag becomes the key to the hash table. All right? In other words, this is the name of a field in the hash file. And what does that point to? That points to the full query name that I typed in. So Android development. This tag I typed in is just sort of, they use the word tag your query. If it simplifies things for you, I mean, this isn't a tag like an HTML tag or an XML tag. This is like a name. So it might be more clear if you consider this saying name your query. So all that tag is in this context is a name for your query. And that name gets saved in your hash table as a key. All right? And that key points to a value. The value being the full name of the query. so. Refresh buttons. All right. What that does is this grabs our saved searches, which is this hash file, or hash data, key and a value. It sorts it. Then it loops through it. And for each iteration of the loop, it goes in and it makes a button. And that's the part that I'm really interested in, the part of making the button. Because this is a part that takes this XML file that contains the new tag information and creates one of these and then inserts that as part of this table. So this is what gives the dynamic part of the GUI. So how do we do it? Well, we create an inflator object. An inflator object is an object that we're going to use to, quote, inflate XML files. Now, if you remember, I used the term inflate when I was talking about the main XML and the other ones. What do I mean by inflate? I mean to take an XML file and to actually create the views that are described in that XML file. So you're bringing it to life. All right? The XML file is simply a definition of different views that you're going to have. When you inflate that, you actually create those objects on the heap. So we need help doing that, right? And therefore, an inflator object is used. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new view that is created by inflating our second XML file. So the second XML file, which is a table row, is processed by the inflator and actually creates a new view. Now you might be a little confused because in the XML file it says that this is a table row. Yet in this method we're creating a view when we inflate that. Well, a table row is an example of a view. A table row is a child class of view. So this is used to create any dynamic view, whether it be a table row or a text field or a label or anything like that. Any view that lives in an XML file we can bring to life by doing this. Now, what do we do for that? We do something real similar to what we've done in all the examples back to our first one. We look for the thing in that new view that we just inflated that has an ID of new tag button. We look for the thing that has a ID of new edit button, and we set its listener. We set the text of that button to the tag. So if we look at this, the text of that button is the name of the tag that we saved it under. How did we do that? Well, when we inflated it, we grabbed the pointer to that button using this, which is just like we've done since the first example, and we set the text to that. We then set an on-click listener to the query button, or for the query button, and for the Edit Listener button. So we've created those two buttons. We have assigned listeners to those buttons. We've assigned text to that first button, but we're not done yet. Why aren't we done? That table row is sort of floating out in space. We have to associate that table row with this table. This table right here. And that's what this line of code does. We're adding to that table, which we pointed to back at the beginning of this class. We have an instance variable for. We're going in and we're adding the adding that new row that we created, that we inflated, to that table. So this is how we get the dynamic interface. We have our main XML file. We have an XML for that incremental bit that we're going to add every time something happens. We inflate it. We grab pointers to the different views on it. We set it. Then we add that view to, again, a main part of our GUI, in this case to our table. All right? Guess what we're going to do with persistence? We're running out of time, but we have a few more things to look at this application. We'll see how it goes Thursday. We may wrap, depending on how it goes time-wise. We could possibly spend some time talking about this app, or we could troubleshoot your problems. We'll see how it goes. I want to actually start by troubleshooting your problems that you're having and working through it. If everything's going okay, maybe we'll do a little bit of a lecture on Thursday. If not, we'll wrap this up the following Tuesday. But if you can imagine, when this loads initially, what are we going to do? We're going to take those shared preferences, loop through them, and dynamically add those buttons in again. So those shared preferences get stored with the app. They're part of the app data. And when we go in and reload it, we're going to look at those and we're going to loop through, because is like an array. The only difference is that in addition to there being a numerical subscript for the element of the array, there's a name subscript, a key. And that's what makes it a hash table, where we have a key and a value. We'll simply loop through those and recreate those buttons each time. Now, we don't have a time to look at that, and we don't have a time to look at what happens when we click those two buttons. But we'll do that again, probably next Tuesday, possibly on Thursday. Questions? That's a more formal word for a hash table or a hash map. An associative array. In other words, instead of there being a numeric subscript, the key is a name. All right. I can ask. Again, the example we're going over is the example from Deedle, so you can download it and you can have the code right in front of you while you're going through this. So if there's something you're having trouble reading on the screen, you can read that. I don't know. It probably wouldn't be the help desk necessarily, but yeah, actually, I'll call them right now and see if there's anything you can do to make the sharper recording of the screen. All right. Questions? All right.